The stars were quiet. That was the first thing Commander Zale noticed when he stepped onto the bridge of his flagship. No human patrol ships, no warning signals, no noise on any frequency. Just silence. Deep, empty, perfect silence, stretching across the sector like a held breath. He smiled. Silence meant they were not ready. Zale was the supreme commander of the Vorkai Empire, the most powerful alien force in the known galaxy. His people had conquered 43 worlds in 300 years. They had burned cities on 6 different planets. They had made entire civilizations disappear from the history books. And now, after years of careful planning, after months of watching and waiting, the time had finally come for their greatest prize. Earth. He walked slowly to the front window of the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond those stars, on a small blue planet that humans called home, was the thing he wanted most: Fort Omega, the strongest military base humanity had ever built. A massive structure floating in orbit above the moon, built with the hardest materials known to science, protected by energy shields that could stop almost anything. Almost. "Commander," said Lieutenant Draven, the officer standing at the main control panel. "All ships are in position. We are ready." Zale did not turn around. He kept his eyes on the stars. "How many ships do we have?" he asked. 800 warships, sir. All armed, all fully powered." Zale nodded slowly. "And the humans? What do they have at Fort Omega right now?" Draven checked his screen. "Our intelligence reports say 200 defense ships, some ground soldiers, a few energy cannons, nothing that can stop us." Zale finally turned around. His eyes were cold and flat like 2 pieces of dark glass. "Then let's not waste any more time," he said. "Begin the attack." The first explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Fort Omega was a beautiful structure. Even the humans who hated war had to admit that. It stretched 3 kilometers from one end to the other, built from thick, gray panels of reinforced metal, with towers and cannons pointing in every direction. At night, when the light of Earth's moon hit its surface, it looked almost peaceful, like a sleeping giant. It did not stay peaceful for long. 800 Vorkai warships came out of hyperspace at exactly the same moment, surrounding Fort Omega from every direction. The human defense systems lit up immediately. Alarms started screaming inside every corridor of the station. Soldiers ran to their positions. Pilots jumped into their fighters. Officers started shouting orders into their communication devices. But they were not ready. They could never have been ready for this. The Vorkai opened fire. Energy beams hit the outer shields of Fort Omega, and the whole structure shook like a toy. The shields held for 11 seconds. The human engineers had built them strong, and they should have been proud of that. But 11 seconds is not very long when 800 ships are firing at the same time. The shields broke. After that, everything happened very fast. The first explosion took out the main power tower on the north side. The lights across half the station went dark. The second explosion hit the docking bay where most of the human defense ships were waiting. And those ships never even got the chance to launch. The third explosion took out the communications center, which meant Fort Omega could no longer call for help. One by one, the pieces of the station started to fall apart. Inside the corridors, it was chaos. Soldiers ran through smoke and broken metal. Fire spread from one section to the next. The emergency systems were screaming, but nobody could hear them over the sound of the explosions. Men and women in uniform were helping each other to escape pods to emergency exits to anywhere that was not on fire. Captain Sarah Voss was running. She was 29 years old with short dark hair and a scar along her left jaw that she had earned in a training accident 3 years ago. She was not the most senior officer on Fort Omega. There were generals and admirals above her. But she was fast, and she was smart. And right now those 2 things were keeping her alive. She turned a corner and almost ran straight into a wall of fire. She stopped hard, her boots sliding on the metal floor, and took a different route. Around her, she could hear the sounds of Fort Omega dying. Metal bending, glass breaking, the deep, horrible groan of a structure that was never meant to make that sound. She was trying to reach the main control room, not because she thought she could save the station. She already knew the station could not be saved. She was trying to reach it because of what was inside it. A small black data card, no bigger than her thumb, that contained information that could not be allowed to fall into Vorkai hands. She turned another corner. Two soldiers appeared from the smoke, running in the opposite direction. "Captain," one of them shouted, "we have to get to the escape pods. The station is breaking apart." "I know," Sarah said, not slowing down. "Go. I'll meet you there." She did not know if that was true. The control room door was locked. The explosion had damaged the electronic lock. Sarah pulled out a small tool from her belt and worked on it for 12 seconds that felt like 12 years. The door opened. She ran inside. The room was half destroyed. Screens were cracked or completely dark. The ceiling on one side had fallen in. But the main console was still there, still glowing faintly with emergency power, and Sarah went straight to it. She found the data card. She pulled it out and pushed it into her jacket pocket. Then the floor shook so hard that she fell. A sound came from above her, a deep, terrible cracking sound. And she looked up and saw the ceiling starting to come down. She did not stop to think. She ran for the door, got through it just as the ceiling collapsed behind her, and kept running. She never stopped running until she reached an escape pod. There was only one left. She got inside, hit the launch button, and the pod fired away from Fort Omega just as the biggest explosion of all hit the station's power core. Sarah watched through the pod's small window as Fort Omega, the strongest military base humanity had ever built, broke apart and turned into fire. Commander Zale stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his screens. Fort Omega was gone. Not damaged, not weakened. Gone. Completely destroyed. In less than 20 minutes, 800 Vorkai warships had ended the thing that humanity had spent 40 years building. "Commander," said Lieutenant Draven, and his voice was almost happy. "Fort Omega has been destroyed. We are detecting no human military presence remaining in this sector. All defense systems are offline. The sector is ours." Zale looked at the burning remains on his screen. Pieces of metal floating in space, some of them still on fire even in the vacuum where fire should not exist. He had seen the destruction of many things in his career. He had ordered the destruction of many things. But this felt different. This felt like a door opening. "Excellent," he said quietly. "Send a message to the Emperor. Tell him the first phase is complete." He turned to face his crew, dozens of Vorkai officers standing at their posts, all watching him. "The humans built their strongest base," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They put their best weapons in it, their best soldiers, their best technology, and in 20 minutes we turned it into dust." He paused. "Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks these creatures are something to fear. They are not. They never were. The human race is finished." The crew did not cheer. Vorkai soldiers were trained to be silent and disciplined, but Zale could see the satisfaction on their faces. They believed him. Every single one of them believed him. Sarah Voss did not know how long she drifted. The escape pod had no main engine. It was built for short distances, for getting away from a disaster, not for traveling across space. It had oxygen for 48 hours, a small food supply, a basic communication system that was not working because the communication center on Fort Omega had been destroyed before she launched, and a single small window. She floated in the dark and watched the stars. She was not crying. She thought about crying. She had friends on that station, people she had worked with for years, people who had laughed with her in the mess hall and trained with her in the simulator. But she could not make the tears come. There was something cold and heavy sitting in her chest where the feelings should have been. She looked at the data card in her hand, this small black card. This small, light, completely ordinary-looking piece of technology. She had risked her life for it. She had run through a burning, exploding space station for it. And now she was alone in the dark in a small pod with no way to call anyone, and she was the only person who knew she had it. She hoped it was worth it. After what she guessed was about 6 hours, her watch had stopped working in the blast. She saw lights outside the pod window. Not stars. Moving lights. Getting closer. She pressed herself against the window and looked. A ship. A small ship, dark gray and fast, moving toward her pod without any running lights on. No markings. No registration signals. Nothing that would tell her who it belonged to. Her hand moved to the small emergency weapon on her belt. The ship stopped next to her pod. A docking clamp connected with a heavy sound. Then the pod door opened from the outside, and a human face appeared. A young man, maybe 22, with tired eyes and a military haircut that had grown out a little too long. "Captain Sarah Voss?" he said. She kept her hand on her weapon. "Who are you?" "My name is Corporal Reyes," he said. "I'm with the 7th Covert Operations Unit." He paused. "We've been waiting for you." Sarah stared at him. "You've been waiting for me? How did you know I was here?" "Fort Omega's communications were destroyed." Reyes looked at the data card in her hand. "We weren't tracking Fort Omega," he said quietly. "We were tracking that." The ship took her deeper into space than she had ever been, away from Earth, away from any normal shipping lane or patrol route, into a part of the galaxy that did not appear on any standard map. Nobody spoke to her during the journey. Reyes gave her food and water and a fresh uniform and then left her alone. She sat in a small room and felt the ship move and tried to understand what was happening. After several hours, they stopped. Reyes came back. "We're here," he said. "Come with me." She followed him through the ship and into a docking corridor and through a large airlock. And on the other side of the airlock, she stopped walking completely. Because on the other side was not a small base. It was not a hidden outpost. It was not a secret room somewhere. It was a facility the size of a city, carved into the inside of a hollow asteroid, with its own gravity, its own light systems, its own air, its own everything. A massive military installation that she had never heard of, never been told about, never even imagined. Hundreds of people moving around, equipment she did not recognize, machines she could not name, and at the center of it all, pointing toward massive doors at the far end of the asteroid, ships. Not 2 or 3 ships, not a squadron. Row after row after row of warships, each one dark and massive and silent, packed together so tightly that she could barely see where one ended and another began. She looked left. She looked right. She looked up toward the ceiling of the asteroid. Ships, everywhere. Ships, as far as she could see. A voice came from behind her. "Impressive, isn't it?" She turned. An old man stood there, maybe 70, with white hair and a straight back and eyes that had seen things she could not imagine. He was wearing a simple gray uniform with no rank markings. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was very quiet. "My name is Admiral Cross," he said. "I built this place. I built those ships. I have been building them for 32 years. He looked at the rows of warships with an expression she could not quite read. "Nobody in the regular military knows this place exists. Nobody in the government knows. Nobody except the people standing in this room right now." Sarah looked around at the facility again. "How many ships?" she asked. Admiral Cross looked at her. 500,000, he said. The words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. Sarah turned back to look at the rows of dark warships. 500,000. She could not picture a number that large. She could not picture what it would look like moving through space together. "The Vorkai just destroyed Fort Omega," the Admiral said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "They think they won. They think humanity has nothing left." He paused. "They are wrong." He started walking toward the ships. Sarah followed without deciding to. "These ships have been waiting for one specific situation," Cross said as they walked. "A situation where the enemy becomes so confident that they stop looking. A situation where they believe the fight is already over." He stopped and looked at her. "They believe that right now. As of today, somewhere deep in the facility, a low rumble started. The sound of engines, of power systems waking up, of something very large beginning to move." Sarah felt it in her chest more than she heard it with her ears. "What happens now?" she asked. Admiral Cross looked at the doors at the far end of the asteroid, the massive doors that, she now understood, opened into space. "Now," he said quietly, "we remind them what humans are, and somewhere on the other side of the galaxy, in the empty space where Fort Omega used to be, Commander Zale was laughing, telling his crew that the humans were finished, that the war was already won, that there was nothing left to fear. He did not yet know what he had started. He did not yet know what was coming." The Vorkai patrol ship Endless Victory was one of the fastest ships in the Empire. It had 12 crew members, 4 long-range scanners, and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It had been on patrol duty for 6 weeks, moving slowly through the outer edges of human space, looking for anything interesting. So far, it had found nothing interesting. Just empty space, dead stars, and the occasional piece of rock floating in the dark. Pilot Sen was bored. He had been bored for 6 weeks. He sat in his chair at the front of the bridge, his chin resting on his hand, watching the scanner screen show him the same thing it always showed him. Nothing. Empty space. More nothing. "Another 3 hours before we reach the checkpoint," said Navigator Vex from the seat beside him. Sen groaned quietly. 3 hours. "You could sleep." "I slept for 9 hours yesterday." "Then sleep again." Sen did not answer. He stared at the scanner screen. He thought about food. He thought about home. He thought about how much he wanted this patrol assignment to end. Then the scanner screen changed. Sen sat up straight. He blinked. He looked closer. He pressed the zoom button on his console, pulling in the image, making it larger, making it clearer. It did not get clearer. It got worse. "Vex," he said. His voice came out strange, too quiet, too flat, the voice of someone who is looking at something their brain cannot process properly. "What?" "Look at my screen." Vex leaned over, looked, said nothing for 4 seconds. "That is a glitch," Vex said finally. "The scanner is broken." "I ran a diagnostic 3 minutes ago. The scanner is working perfectly." Another silence. The scanner screen was showing them signals. Not one signal, not 10, not 100. The screen was filled, completely, edge to edge, top to bottom, with thousands upon thousands of contact signals, all moving in the same direction, all at the same speed, all in perfect formation. The scanner could not even count them properly. The number on the screen kept changing as the system tried to process what it was seeing. It finally settled on a number. 500,000. "That is not possible," Vex said. "I know. No fleet is that large. No one has ever built a fleet that large. That cannot be." "I know," Sen said again. He reached for the communication controls with a hand that was not quite steady. "This is Patrol Ship Endless Victory," he said into the system. "Calling all Vorkai command stations. We have a contact report." He stopped, took a breath. "We are reading 500,000, I repeat 500,000, unknown ships, moving in formation. Direction is toward Vorkai space." Another pause. "This is not a mistake. I have checked the scanner twice. Someone please respond." The line was quiet for a moment. Then a voice came back, a senior officer at the nearest command station. And even through the communication static, Sen could hear that the man was not taking this seriously. "Patrol ship, run your diagnostics again. You have a faulty scanner." Sen looked at his screen. "Sir," he said carefully, "the ships are now visible through the front window." A long silence. "Send us visual confirmation." Sen turned on the external camera and pointed it forward. On the screen, filling the darkness of space from one edge of the view to the other, were warships. Dark, massive, silent warships, moving like a wall of metal through the stars. They had no running lights, no markings that he could see. They made no sound on any communication frequency. They just moved. "Sending visual now," Sen said quietly. He heard the officer on the other end of the line make a sound. Not words, just a sound. The sound a person makes when they see something that does not fit inside their understanding of the world. Then the line went very, very quiet. Inside the deep vault, Sarah Voss had not slept in 31 hours. She did not feel tired. That was the strange thing. She felt like every part of her body was running on something stronger than sleep. Something sharp and electric that lived behind her eyes and kept her moving, kept her thinking, kept her watching the screens in front of her. Admiral Cross had given her a position on the command bridge of the facility, not because she had asked for it, because she had the data card. And the data card, she now understood, was not just information. It was a key. A very specific, very important key that the people in this facility had been waiting for. She held it now, standing at the main console, watching the screens. 500,000 warships were moving through space on every screen in front of her, organized into sections. Each section with its own commander. Each commander reporting to a central system that fed all information back to the deep vault. The scale of it was still something she could not fully hold in her head. Every time she tried to think about the number, 500,000, her brain just gave up and replaced it with the word many. Very, very many. "Fleet is at full speed," said Commander Yates, the officer standing at the panel to her left. He was a large, quiet man who spoke in short sentences and never seemed surprised by anything. "All sections reporting ready. No mechanical issues. No communication failures." "How long until they reach the first Vorkai defense line?" Sarah asked. 14 hours. She nodded. 14 hours. She turned to look at Admiral Cross, who was standing slightly behind her, hands behind his back, watching the same screens with that same unreadable expression he always seemed to have. "They know we're coming," she said. It was not a question. "They know something is coming," Cross said. "They don't know what it is yet." He paused. "By the time they understand what they're looking at, it will be too late to prepare for it." Sarah turned back to the screens. She thought about Fort Omega. She thought about the sound it made when it started to break apart. She thought about the faces of the soldiers who had run past her in the corridors, running for escape pods, running for exits, running for their lives. She pressed her hand flat against the console. 14 hours, she thought. The Vorkai first defense line was called the Iron Wall. It was not a wall exactly. It was a line of 40 heavy warships, spread across a section of space that served as the main entrance into Vorkai territory. The ships were connected by a network of communication relays and early warning scanners, and between them they had enough firepower to stop most threats before they got anywhere near Vorkai home planets. Admiral Gorak commanded the Iron Wall. He had commanded it for 11 years. In 11 years, nothing had ever come through that he could not handle. He was standing on the bridge of his flagship when the reports started coming in from the patrol ships. He read the first report. He put it down. He picked it up again and read it a second time. 500,000 ships. He called his communications officer. "Get me visual confirmation from every patrol ship in that sector." The confirmations came in one after another. Every screen on his bridge was showing the same thing. A wall of dark warships, moving through space in perfect formation, heading directly for the Iron Wall. Gorak stood very still for a long time. He had fought humans before. Small skirmishes, border disputes, the kind of fighting that happened at the edges of Empire where no one was really paying attention. He had always found humans to be predictable, emotional. They fought hard when they were angry and fell apart when they were scared. These ships did not look emotional. They looked patient. "How many ships do we have on the Iron Wall right now?" he asked. 40, sir. "Total firepower compared to what's coming at us?" His weapons officer was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was very careful. "Sir, if those contact readings are accurate, we are facing odds of approximately 12,000 to 1. Gorak looked at his screens. "Get me Commander Zale," he said. Now, Commander Zale was eating dinner when the call came through. He listened to Gorak's report without saying anything. He listened to the numbers. He looked at the visual confirmation that was being sent through on a secondary screen beside his meal. Then he put down his food. "This is a trick," he said. "The humans are projecting false signals. They want us to panic. They want us to pull ships away from our current positions." He leaned toward the screen. "Do not move the Iron Wall. Do not request backup. Hold your position and wait." "Sir," Gorak said, "if these signals are real, They are not real," Zale said. "I destroyed Fort Omega myself. I watched it burn. The humans have no fleet of that size. They never had a fleet of that size. This is a projection, a fake signal, a last desperate attempt to make us afraid." He straightened up. "Hold the line. That is an order." The call ended. Zale sat back in his chair and picked up his food again. He was not worried. He was certain. He had been certain about many things in his career, and he had been right about almost all of them. The Iron Wall saw the human fleet with their own eyes exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes later. Not on a scanner, not through a camera feed. With their own eyes through the front windows of their ships, a darkness that was somehow darker than space, a moving shadow that stretched from one end of their view to the other, and as it got closer, it resolved into individual shapes, individual ships, individual dark metal hulls that reflected no light. and made no sound. 500,000 warships. Admiral Gorak stood on his bridge and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt small. "Sir," said his weapons officer, and her voice had completely lost its professional calm. "Sir, they are not slowing down. I can see that. Do we open fire?" Gorak looked at the wall of ships filling every screen, every window, every camera feed on his entire flagship. He thought about Zale's order. He thought about the word hold. He thought about 40 ships against 500,000. "Open fire," he said, because there was nothing else to say. Because standing still and doing nothing while something that large came toward you was simply not something his brain would allow. The iron wall opened fire. 40 Vorkai warships, each one a serious piece of military technology, each one carrying weapons that could crack a small moon. They fired everything they had at the front edge of the approaching human fleet. The explosions were bright and large and impressive. They did almost nothing. The human fleet did not slow down. It did not change formation. A few ships on the outer edge adjusted their angle slightly, not to avoid the fire, but to ensure the fire hit their shield systems rather than their hulls, and kept moving. The Vorkai energy beams hit human shields and spread across them like water hitting glass, lighting up blue and white for a moment before fading to nothing. 40 ships, 500,000 targets. The math was not complicated. The human fleet did not even fire back immediately. It just kept coming, slow and steady and enormous, like a tide that had decided to cross a beach and was not particularly interested in the sand it was covering. Then, from the center of the human formation, 12 ships moved forward. Just 12. Out of 500,000. They were larger than the others. Not by much, but noticeably. They moved to the front of the formation with a kind of quiet purpose that was somehow more frightening than any weapon Gorak had ever seen, and they pointed themselves at the iron wall. "Sir," said the weapons officer, "those 12 ships are powering up their main weapons systems." "What kind of weapons?" We don't have identification on that weapon signature. It doesn't match anything in our records." Gorak watched the screens. The 12 ships fired. It was not like the Vorkai weapons, which were beams of concentrated energy, bright and loud and visible. The human weapons were something different. Pulses, quiet and dark, that moved through space almost too fast to see and hit the iron wall ships before the Vorkai targeting systems could even register them. 8 of Gorak's 40 ships were gone in the first 4 seconds. Not damaged, not disabled. Gone. As if they had simply stopped existing. Gorak grabbed the arms of his command chair. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," he shouted. But there was nowhere to maneuver to. The human fleet covered too much space. There was no direction that did not have human ships in it. The 12 vessels fired again. 11 more Vorkai ships disappeared. In the deep vault, Sarah Voss watched the battle on her screens and felt something complicated move through her. Something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite grief, but lived somewhere between the two. "Iron wall is breaking," said Commander Yates beside her. "They're running." The remaining Vorkai ships on the iron wall turned and fled. Some of them made it to hyperspace. Some of them did not make it in time. The human fleet passed through where the iron wall had been without stopping, without slowing down, without even reorganizing. It simply moved forward, 500,000 dark ships in perfect formation, heading deeper into Vorkai space. Sarah pressed the communication button on her console. "Captain Voss to all fleet sections," she said. "Iron wall is cleared. Proceed to the next phase. All section commanders maintain formation." She paused. "Stay disciplined. Stay focused. Remember what they did." She released the button. Around her, the deep vault was very quiet. Everyone was watching their screens. Everyone was watching the fleet move forward. Admiral Cross came to stand beside her. "Gorak will report to Zale now," he said quietly. "Zale will finally understand that this is not a trick." "What will he do?" Sarah asked. Cross was quiet for a moment. "He will send his best weapon," he said. "The planet killer ship, the Eternal Darkness." He looked at her. "It is 3 times the size of anything we have in the fleet. It has destroyed 4 human colonies in the past decade. Zale is very proud of it." Sarah looked at the screens, at the fleet. at 500,000 ships moving through the dark. "Let him send it," she said. Something moved at the back of her eyes. Not anger, not fear, but something harder than both of those things. Something that had been sitting in her chest since she watched Fort Omega break apart through the window of an escape pod. "We brought the right weapon for that too," she said. On the other side of the galaxy, in his private quarters on his flagship, Commander Zale was looking at Admiral Gorak's battle report. His dinner was cold. He had not touched it. He read the report a second time. He read the numbers. He looked at the camera footage, the 12 human ships, the quiet dark pulses, 21 Vorkai warships simply ceasing to exist. His hands, he noticed, were very still on the desk in front of him. For the first time in a very long time, Commander Zale did not feel certain. He reached for his communication device and sent a single order to the captain of his most powerful ship. "Activate the Eternal Darkness. Move to intercept." He set the device down. He looked at the cold food in front of him. He did not eat it. The Eternal Darkness was not just a ship, it was a statement. Commander Zale had commissioned it 9 years ago, after the Vorkai Empire had decided that winning wars was no longer enough. They wanted to end wars. They wanted to look at an enemy and show them something so large, so powerful, so completely impossible to fight against that the enemy would simply stop. Would look at the Eternal Darkness and understand, on a level deeper than thought, that resistance was not a real option. It had worked 4 times. 4 human colonies had seen the Eternal Darkness come out of hyperspace, and 4 human colonies had surrendered before a single shot was fired. The ship was 40 kilometers long, longer than some cities on Earth. Its hull was built from a material that absorbed energy weapons rather than deflecting them. Its main cannon, the one they called the spine, could fire a beam of concentrated gravitational force that did not just destroy a target, but collapsed it, pulled it inward until it crushed itself into something the size of a fist. Captain Mord commanded the Eternal Darkness. He was not a complicated person. He did not think deeply about the things he did. He had a job, he did his job well, and the job was this: go where Zale pointed him, fire the spine at whatever Zale wanted destroyed, and come home. He had done this 4 times. He expected to do it a 5th time now without much difficulty. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Darkness and looked at the scanner readings showing him the human fleet. 500,000 ships. Mord looked at the number for a long moment. Then he looked at his own ship. 40 kilometers of absorbed energy hull. The spine. Enough secondary weapons to fight a small war by themselves. He was not afraid of 500,000 ships. He had the Eternal Darkness. Numbers did not matter when you had the Eternal Darkness. "All systems ready," said his weapons officer. "Take us in," Mord said. Sarah Voss saw the Eternal Darkness on her screen before anyone said a word about it. She saw it because the scanner system flagged it differently from everything else. Not as a contact, not as a ship, but as an object. The way it flagged asteroids and space stations and other things that were too large to be filed under the normal categories. She stared at the reading for 3 seconds, then she said very calmly, "Cross, look at this." Admiral Cross came and looked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The Eternal Darkness. You know it?" "I know everything about it," he said. "I have been studying it for 6 years." He looked at her. "It destroyed the Kepler colony in 2187. 8,000 people. It destroyed the Brennan station the year after that. It has never been stopped. Never even been seriously damaged." He paused. "Zale is very proud of it." "You said that before," Sarah said. "I meant it both times." She looked at the scanner reading. The object, she could not quite make herself call it a ship. Her brain kept filing it under problem, was moving toward them at a steady speed. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of the command bridge changing. Voices getting quieter. Movements getting faster. People who had been calm for the past several hours were now sitting up straighter, checking their screens twice, doing the mental math that everyone does when something very large is coming toward them. "Section commanders are asking for orders," said Commander Yates beside her. Sarah kept her eyes on the screen. "Tell them to hold formation," she said. "Nobody fires. Nobody moves. We wait." The eternal darkness is going to be in firing range in approximately 12 minutes. I know. Its main weapon. I know what its main weapon does, Sarah said, quiet, flat. Tell them to hold. Yates relayed the order. Sarah turned to Admiral Cross. The Omega ships, she said. Are they ready? Cross nodded slowly. They have been ready for 32 years. Captain Mord watched the human fleet on his screens and felt something he recognized as mild irritation. They were not running. Every other enemy he had ever faced with the eternal darkness had done one of two things. They had either surrendered immediately, or they had broken formation and tried to scatter. Scattering never worked, because the spine could track moving targets as easily as stationary ones, but at least it showed that they understood the situation. These humans were not running, they were not scattering. They were holding their formation, all 500,000 ships, sitting in space like they were waiting for a bus, and doing absolutely nothing. They must not understand what they're looking at, said his weapons officer. Then we'll show them, Mord said. Charge the spine. The sound of the spine charging was something that Mord had always found satisfying. It started deep in the ship, a low vibration that you felt in your feet before you heard it with your ears, and it built slowly, a growing hum that rose in pitch over about 40 seconds until the whole ship was trembling with it. Every time he heard it, Mord thought, this is what power sounds like. Spine at full charge, said the weapons officer. Pick a target, Mord said. Front edge of the human formation. Make it count. The eternal darkness fired. The spine's beam was invisible. Gravitational force had no color, but its effect was not invisible. A section of the human front line simply crunched. 30 ships, pulled inward by a force that overwhelmed every structural material known to science, collapsed into themselves in about 2 seconds and then disappeared, compressed into objects smaller than a human fist, which then floated in space looking like nothing at all. 30 ships. Gone. Mord waited for the human fleet to break. It did not break. It did not move. They're still holding formation, said his navigator, and there was something uncertain in her voice now. Fire again, Mord said. The spine charged. Fired. Another section of the human front line collapsed and disappeared, and the human fleet still did not move. On the Deep Vault's command bridge, Sarah watched 30 more ships disappear from her screens and pressed her hands flat on the console in front of her. 60 ships. The eternal darkness had killed 60 ships in 2 shots, out of 500,000. She thought, it does not know that those numbers do not hurt us the way it expects them to. She thought, it is waiting for us to panic. She turned to Yates. Bring the Omega ships forward. Yates spoke into his headset. On the screens, 12 ships moved. They came from deep inside the human formation, working their way through the rows of warships to the front, moving with a speed and precision that was very different from the steady, patient movement of the main fleet. These 12 ships moved like they knew exactly where they were going, and exactly what they were going to do when they got there. They were not the largest ships in the human fleet. They were not even close to the size of the eternal darkness. But they had been built for one specific purpose, and that purpose was standing 40 kilometers long, directly in front of them. Omega ships in position, said Yates. Sarah took a breath. Tell them to fire. Captain Mord was charging the spine for a third shot when 12 human ships appeared at the front of the formation. He noticed them because they moved differently from the others. Faster, more purposeful. They arranged themselves in a pattern that his tactical officer could not immediately identify. What are they doing? Mord asked. Unknown, sir. The formation they're taking is not in any human military manual we have on record. Mord watched the 12 ships settle into their positions. Then they fired. He did not know what the weapon was. His scanner system could not identify it. It did not look like anything. No beam, no pulse, no visible effect at all. He looked at his screens and thought for one moment that the 12 ships had malfunctioned, that they had fired something that simply had not worked. Then the eternal darkness shook, not from an external impact, from inside. From somewhere in the middle of the ship a sound started, not an explosion, but something worse than an explosion. A structural sound. The sound of something that was built to be permanent, suddenly deciding that it was not. Report, Mord shouted. Sir, we are reading internal structural failure in sections 7 through 19. The spine's power core is... The ship shook again. Harder. The Omega ships fired some kind of resonance weapon, his tactical officer said, and his voice was rising with something that was trying very hard not to be panic. It found the resonance frequency of our hull material, and it is... Sir, it is shaking the ship apart from the inside. Emergency shields. All power to structural integrity. We're trying, sir, but the frequency is... It is in everything. It is in the hull itself. We cannot shield against something that is already inside. The lights on the bridge went out. The emergency lights came on, red, dim, casting everything in the color of something gone wrong. Captain Mord stood in the red light and felt the eternal darkness, his ship, his untouchable, unstoppable, 40-kilometer ship, shake itself apart underneath him. It took 3 minutes and 44 seconds. At the end of those 3 minutes and 44 seconds, the eternal darkness was not a ship anymore. It was a debris field. 40 kilometers of the most advanced Vorkai military technology ever built, and it had taken 12 human ships less than 4 minutes to reduce it to floating pieces of metal. In the deep vault, nobody cheered. They just watched the screens. Sarah Voss looked at the place on her scanner where the eternal darkness had been, and then she looked at the rest of the Vorkai space that stretched out ahead of the fleet, and she said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Move the fleet forward. Next phase." What happened in the following 6 hours changed the shape of the war completely. The human fleet moved through Vorkai space like a hand moving through water. Steady, unstoppable. Not in a hurry, but not slow either. Every Vorkai defense position they reached, they dismantled. Not destroyed, dismantled. Taken apart piece by piece, with precision and patience, leaving behind disabled ships rather than destroyed ones wherever possible. Sarah had given that order specifically. They were not here to kill everyone. They were here to make a point. The point was being made. Vorkai commanders across the sector were sending messages to each other in a panic, pulling ships from border positions and patrol routes to try to form new defense lines. And the new defense lines were failing because there was simply not enough time to organize properly. The human fleet was moving too fast. The Vorkai military, which had spent years believing it was the most powerful force in the galaxy, was discovering what it felt like to be completely outpaced. Commander Zale received the news about the eternal darkness while he was in a meeting with his senior staff. He was told that the ship had been destroyed in under 4 minutes. He was told that 12 human ships had done it. He was told that the human fleet was now inside Vorkai territory and moving toward the outer colony planets. He said nothing for a very long time. His senior staff sat around the table and watched him and also said nothing. Because when Zale was silent like this, with that particular flatness in his eyes, the intelligent thing to do was to wait. Finally he spoke. "Where is the fleet heading?" "Based on their current course," said his intelligence officer carefully. "They appear to be heading for Vorkai Prime, the home planet." Zale looked at the table. "Redirect every available ship to protect Vorkai Prime," he said. "Pull from the outer colonies if you have to. Everything we have." His officers started to move. Then Zale said, "Wait." They stopped. He was thinking. They could see him thinking. Could see something working behind his eyes. Some calculation that was not purely military. "The Karath colony," he said slowly. "How many humans are living there?" Silence around the table. The Karath colony was a small human settlement on the edge of Vorkai space. A group of miners and their families. About 3,000 people, who had been living there since before the war started. Technically, they were on Vorkai territory. Technically, under the laws of war, they were enemy civilians. Everyone at the table understood what Zale was suggesting. His intelligence officer said very quietly, "Approximately 3,000 humans, sir. Civilians, families." Zale's jaw tightened. He did not like this option. He had never particularly liked this option. But the fleet outside was heading for his home planet, and he had just watched his most powerful ship get destroyed in under 4 minutes, and he was running out of other options. "Send ships to the Karath colony," he said. "Take the colonists. Hold them." He paused. "And then call Captain Voss." Sarah was reviewing the fleet's next formation when the communication request came in. "It's Zale," said Yates, and the surprise in his voice was genuine. Sarah straightened. "Put him on." The screen showed a face she had only seen in intelligence briefings before now, older than she expected, tired in a way that seemed new, but with those flat, dark eyes that were exactly the same as they had been in every photograph she had studied. "Captain Voss," Zale said. "Commander Zale," she said. "Your fleet is impressive." He said it the way someone says something true that they would prefer not to say. "Thank you." A pause. "I have something of yours," he said. 3,000 civilians, Kareth colony. They are currently under Vorkai military supervision. He let that sit for a moment. "I am proposing a conversation about terms." Sarah looked at him. Her face showed nothing. Inside, something was moving. The cold, heavy thing in her chest, the thing that had been sitting there since Fort Omega burned. She had known something like this was coming. She had hoped it would not. But she had known. "What kind of terms?" she said. "You stop the fleet," Zale said. "You pull back. We discuss a border, an agreement. We end this without more destruction." "And the colonists?" "Released. Immediately." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Around her, the command bridge was completely silent. Every person on it was watching her, watching the screen, not moving, barely breathing. She thought about 3,000 people, families, children, miners who had gone to Kareth colony because it was work, because it was opportunity, because it was a life, not because they wanted to be caught in the middle of a war. She thought about Fort Omega. She thought about the 8,000 people at the Kepler colony, the ones that the eternal darkness had erased. "I need 2 hours," she said. Zale blinked. That was not the answer he had expected. 2 hours for what? "To think," Sarah said simply. "I will contact you." She cut the communication. The bridge stayed silent for another moment. Then Admiral Cross, standing behind her, said quietly, "He is buying time." "I know," Sarah said. "He wants us to stop the fleet while he reorganizes his defenses." "I know. So what are you thinking?" Sarah looked at the screens. At the fleet. At 500,000 ships waiting for her next order. At the map of Vorkai space with the human fleet's position marked on it, and Vorkai Prime marked further ahead, and the tiny dot on the edge of everything that was the Kareth colony. "I'm thinking," she said, "that 3,000 people are not going to be enough to stop this fleet." She paused. "And I am thinking that Zale knows that too, which means he is not actually trying to stop the fleet." She turned to face Cross. "He is trying to change what I'm willing to do," she said. "He wants me to be the person who had to choose between 3,000 civilian lives and finishing this war. He wants that choice to cost me something, to slow me down, to make me hesitate." Her voice was very calm. "He wants me to feel something that gets in the way." Cross looked at her for a long moment. "And does it?" he asked. Sarah turned back to the screens. "Get me the commander of the 3rd Covert Unit," she said to Yates. "The small ship teams, the ones who can move fast and quiet." She paused. "And keep the main fleet moving. Do not slow down." Yates started working. Sarah looked at the dot on the map that was the Kareth colony. She was not going to stop the fleet, but she was also not going to leave 3,000 people behind. The cold, heavy thing in her chest was still there. It had not gone anywhere. But she had learned in the past 36 hours that cold and heavy did not mean stopped. It meant focused. Then an alert appeared on every screen on the bridge at the same time. A new signal coming from deep space, from a direction that was not Vorkai space, not human space, not any space that currently had a name on any map. Something was out there. Something large. Something that had not been there an hour ago. "What is that?" Yates said. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Sarah stared at the signal on her screen. The signal that was not Vorkai. That was not human. That was not anything in any database on any ship in her fleet or in the deep vault. The signal that was getting larger, getting closer. And then Zale's face appeared on her screen again, without her calling him, without any request, just suddenly there. And for the first time since she had seen his face in the intelligence briefings, he did not look like a man who was calculating. He looked like a man who was afraid. Captain Voss, he said. His voice was different now, stripped of everything except the words. I did not plan this. I want you to know that. What is coming? I did not plan it. I do not know how to stop it. A pause. And neither do you. Sarah looked at the signal on her screen, getting larger, getting closer. What is it? She asked. Zale looked at her through the screen. The thing I used to win, he said quietly. Before I had the eternal darkness. Before I had the iron wall. Before any of this. He paused. I sent it away 80 years ago because I was afraid of it. I sent it into deep space and I told myself it would never come back. His eyes did not move from hers. It came back. The signal had no name. That was the first problem. Every object in space had a signature, a specific pattern of energy, radiation, or movement that scanners could read and identify. Stars had signatures. Planets had signatures. Ships had signatures. Even debris fields and dead satellites had signatures that matched something in some database somewhere. This signal matched nothing. In the Deep Vault, 3 separate teams of analysts ran the reading through every database they had. Military records, scientific archives, historical logs going back 200 years. They ran it through alien databases that humanity had captured during border conflicts. They ran it through theoretical models that had never been tested against real data. Nothing. Whatever was coming toward them from the deep dark of space, nobody had ever seen it before. Nobody had ever recorded it. Nobody had ever named it because nobody had ever known it existed. Nobody except Zale. Sarah Voss stood at her console and looked at the signal growing on her screen, and felt something she had not felt since she was running through the burning corridors of Fort Omega. Not fear exactly. Something adjacent to fear. The feeling of standing at the edge of something and not being able to see the bottom. Talk to me, she said to her analysts. Anything, size, speed, composition, give me something. The lead analyst, a young woman named Dr. Okafor who had been awake for 20 hours and looked at, turned from her screen with an expression that Sarah did not like. Size is the problem, Okafor said. The scanner keeps giving us different readings. It is either very large and close, or impossibly large and far away, and we cannot determine which, because the signal is doing something our instruments are not designed to measure. She paused. What we can tell you is that it is accelerating. It was moving slowly an hour ago. It is moving faster now, and it is moving toward us. Toward the fleet specifically? Okafor hesitated. Toward everything. Toward this entire region of space. It does not appear to be targeting us. It appears to be... She looked for the word. Returning. Sarah looked at her screens. Returning. She thought about what Zale had said. I sent it away 80 years ago. Not destroyed. Not stopped. Sent away. Like something you put in a room and lock the door on because you cannot deal with it yet. 80 years ago. That was before her parents were born, before Fort Omega was built, before the Vorkai Empire had reached this far into the galaxy. Whatever this thing was, it had been traveling through deep space for 80 years, and now it had turned around. Get me Zale, she said. Zale was waiting for her call. He appeared on her screen immediately, and in the hours since their last conversation, something had shifted in him. The calculation was completely gone now. What was left was just a man, older than he looked in intelligence photos, sitting in a chair on the bridge of a ship that suddenly felt very small. You said you sent it away, Sarah said. No greeting, no preamble. I need you to tell me everything. Zale looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded once, slowly. Before the Iron Wall, he said. Before the eternal darkness, before I was Supreme Commander, I was a junior weapons officer. Very young, very ambitious. He paused. The Vorkai Empire had a weapons program, deep black. No records, no oversight, no limits. They were trying to build something that could end wars permanently. Not win them. End them. Something so powerful that no civilization would ever challenge the Empire again. What did they build? Sarah asked. They did not build it, Zale said. They found it. Deep in space, in a region we had never explored. A structure. Not a ship exactly, but something that moved like a ship. Something that responded to commands. Something that seemed almost... He stopped. chose his next word carefully. Awake. The bridge of the deep vault was completely silent. Every person on it had stopped what they were doing. It responded to Vorkai commands, Sarah asked. For a while. We studied it for 3 years. We learned to direct it, to point it at things. It was... He looked down at his hands. Effective. More effective than anything we had ever seen. It did not just destroy targets. It unmade them. Removed them from existence so completely that even the atoms were gone. A long pause. After we used it twice, it stopped responding to our commands. It started making its own decisions about what to remove from existence. 3 Vorkai ships. 2 of our own research stations. A planet we had already colonized. He finally looked back at her. We could not stop it. We could not destroy it. The best minds in the Empire spent 8 months trying to destroy it and nothing worked. His voice was very flat now. So we tricked it. We found a way to give it a destination. Deep space, far from everything. A direction with nothing in it for 1,000 light years. And it went. You pointed it away from yourself and hoped it kept going, Sarah said. Yes. And now it turned around. Yes. Sarah looked at her screens. At the signal. At the fleet. At the 500,000 ships that suddenly felt less significant than they had an hour ago. Why did it turn around, she asked. Zale was quiet for a moment. I think, he said carefully, that it detected the weapons fire. From Fort Omega. From the Iron Wall. From all of this. He gestured vaguely at the war happening around him. I think it came back to find out what was making so much noise. Sarah stared at him. You are telling me, she said very slowly, that this war, your attack on Fort Omega, woke it up. Zale did not answer. He did not need to. Sarah turned away from the screen and looked at Admiral Cross, who was standing very still behind her, with an expression she had never seen on his face before. 32 years building the fleet, she said quietly. Did you know about this? No, Cross said. Simply, honestly. I did not know about this. Sarah turned back to the screen. Zale, she said. Do you have anything in your fleet that can fight it? No. Do you know anything about it that can help us? A pause. One thing. When we were studying it, we found that it communicated, not in language, in frequency, a specific energy frequency that it used when it was calm, when it was not active. Our scientists believed it was a kind of resting state. If something could match that frequency precisely, it might... He stopped. Might what? Might remind it of what it felt like to be still. Sarah looked at Dr. Okafor. Did you get that? Okafor was already working. I heard it. Give me time. The signal reached visual range 40 minutes later. Every ship in the human fleet and every ship in the remaining Vorkai forces saw it at the same time, and for approximately 4 seconds, 2 civilizations that had been trying to destroy each other forgot completely about the war. Because the thing coming toward them was not a ship. It was not a weapon. It was not a structure. It was not anything that fit neatly into any category that either human or Vorkai minds had developed for understanding the universe. It was large. That was the first word that anyone reached for, and it was not adequate, but it was the only one available. It was large the way a mountain is large, not just in size but in presence, in the way it made everything around it feel smaller and less significant. It moved through space without any visible means of propulsion. It had no engines, no exhaust, no energy signature that matched any known drive system. It simply moved, the way a thought moves through a mind, and the space around it bent slightly as it passed through it, and it was looking at them. There were no eyes on it, no features at all that a human or Vorkai face would recognize as a face. But it was looking at them. Everyone felt it simultaneously, on every ship, in every cockpit, at every console, the sensation of being observed by something that was not using light to observe them. On the Endless Victory, Pilot Sen grabbed his navigator's arm without meaning to. On Zale's flagship, 3 officers left their posts and had to be ordered back. On the Deep Vault's command bridge, Sarah Voss stood very still and looked at the thing on her screens and said, quietly, to no one in particular, "It is trying to understand what we are." Nobody disagreed with her. The first thing it did was remove 17 ships from existence. Not human ships, not Vorkai ships. Both. A random selection from both fleets chosen by criteria that no tactical mind on either side could identify. There was no beam, no explosion. 17 ships were simply there, and then they were not. And the space where they had been was so empty it seemed to have forgotten they had ever existed. On the human fleet's communication channels, voices started appearing that were not supposed to be there. Pilots asking for orders, section commanders reporting the losses, people trying to make sense of something that did not make sense. "Hold," Sarah said into the fleet-wide channel. "All ships hold position. Do not fire. Do not move. Hold." "Captain," said Yates beside her, and his voice was careful in the way that voices get when the speaker is working very hard to sound normal. "If we don't move, it will—" "If we move, we look like a threat," Sarah said. "If we fire, we look like a threat. We hold." She turned to Okafor. "The frequency. How close are you?" "Close," Okafor said. Her hands were moving fast on her console. "The signal it's putting out, it is complex, it keeps shifting, but there is a pattern underneath the shifts. A bass note. I need 4 more minutes." "You have 2, Sarah said. She turned back to her screens. The thing was moving slowly through the space between the 2 fleets, and as it moved, ships disappeared. Not quickly, not in groups. One here, one there, both sides equally, as if it was collecting samples, as if it was curious, as if it was testing. Zale's voice came through the communication channel. "Voss, my ships are going to break formation. I cannot hold them much longer." "Hold them," she said. "You do not command my—" "Zale." Her voice came out harder than she intended. "If your ships break and run, it will chase them, and if it chases them, it will come back angrier than it left. Hold your ships." A silence. "How long?" Zale asked. 2 minutes. Another silence. Then, 2 minutes. Sarah looked at the thing on her screens. Another ship disappeared, human this time, from the 4th section. She felt it like a tap on her chest. She kept her face still. "Okafor," she said. "Almost," Okafor said. "Almost, yes. Yes, I have it." She looked up. "Base frequency locked. But Captain, to match it precisely, we need to broadcast on every channel simultaneously. Every ship in both fleets. The combined signal needs to be large enough to reach it." Sarah looked at her screens. At the 2 fleets, at 500,000 human warships, and however many Vorkai ships were still operational, she opened a channel to Zale. "I need your ships to broadcast a frequency on my signal," she said. "All of them. Everything you have left." A pause. "You want me to have my ships do something on your command?" "Yes." "And if I say no, then we both keep losing ships until there are no ships left to lose." She paused. "Zale, I watched Fort Omega burn. I watched it from an escape pod while I was the only person on it. I am not asking you to be my friend. I am asking you to survive." The longest silence yet. Then Zale said, "Send me the frequency." What happened next lasted exactly 11 seconds. On Sarah's signal, every human ship and every remaining Vorkai ship broadcast the frequency simultaneously. A single sustained note, a specific vibration in a specific range, pushing outward through space from thousands of sources at once. Alone, each ship's broadcast would have been too small. Together, they were something different. Together, they filled the space around the thing with a sound it recognized, the sound of being still. The thing stopped moving. The disappearances stopped. For 11 seconds, the thing was completely motionless, suspended in space between 2 fleets, surrounded by the frequency of its own resting state, and something in it that had been active and curious and dangerous slowly became something else. Became quiet. On the 12th second, it began to move again. But differently. Not toward the fleets, not toward any planet or station or target. It turned, slowly, with a kind of deliberateness that made Sarah think, for one strange moment, of a person who has been interrupted and is deciding to go back to what they were doing before. And it moved away, back into deep space, back toward the dark. Getting smaller on the screens, getting further, the signal decreasing in strength. The scanner numbers changing in the right direction for the first time. Going, gone, The communication channels were silent for almost a full minute. Then Pilot Sen, on the Vorkai patrol ship Endless Victory, said into his open channel to nobody in particular, "What just happened?" It was not really a question. Nobody answered it. On the Deep Vault's command bridge, Sarah Voss stood at her console and looked at the empty space on her screens where the thing had been, and she breathed. Just breathed, for a moment, the way you breathe when something that was sitting on your chest has been lifted off. Admiral Cross came to stand beside her. "It worked," he said. "It worked," she agreed. "I did not know if it would work." Neither did I. They stood together for a moment, looking at the screens. Then Zale's face appeared. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Not tired exactly. Something else. The look of a man who has been shown something about himself that he would have preferred not to see. "The colonists at Karath," Sarah said before he could speak. "Release them." Zale nodded. "Just once. Already done." A pause. "Voss, what happens now?" Sarah looked at him. She thought about Fort Omega. She thought about the 8,000 people at the Kepler colony. She thought about the Iron Wall and the eternal darkness and the 6 weeks of war and everything it had cost. She thought about 11 seconds of both fleets broadcasting the same frequency. "You surrender," she said. "Formally, to the human fleet. Full terms to be negotiated with the Earth Council." She paused. "And then we figure out what that thing actually is, and how to send it further away." Another pause. "Together." Zale looked at her for a long time. "You would work with us," he said. "After everything." "I would work with anyone who can help make sure that thing never comes back," Sarah said simply, "whether I like them or not." Something moved across Zale's face. Not quite respect, not quite relief. Something that did not have a clean name. "Agreed," he said. 3 weeks later, Sarah Voss stood at the window of a temporary command station and looked at the stars. The fleet was still out there. 500,000 warships, most of them. Some had returned to the Deep Vault. Some were maintaining positions at former Vorkai defense points. Some were escorting Vorkai ships to the negotiation zones where the formal surrender was being processed. The war was ending. Not cleanly. Wars never ended cleanly. But it was ending. The paperwork would take months. The arguments would take years. The rebuilding would take longer than that. But it was ending. Her communicator buzzed. She looked at it. A message from the Deep Vault, from a young analyst she did not know. A new signal, the message said. Different direction, different signature. Not the same thing that had come and gone. Something entirely new. Different galaxy. The message estimated the signal's origin as coming from somewhere between 2 billion and 3 billion light-years away. Moving toward them, Sarah read the message twice. She set the communicator down on the windowsill. She looked at the stars for a long moment. Then she smiled. Very slightly. The smile of someone who has looked at something very large and very dangerous and decided, not for the first time, that it was simply the next problem. She picked up the communicator. She opened a channel to Fleet Command. "This is Captain Voss," she said. "We have a new signal. I am sending you the details now." She looked out at the stars, at the 500,000 ships still out there waiting. "Begin analysis, and keep the fleet ready." She paused. "We still have 500,000 warships with nothing to do." She closed the channel. Outside the window, the stars were quiet again. For now.